Good afternoon from the Gothenburg Learning Center. I'm Mark Ryman, Learning Center agronomist, and I'm here with Alex Rosa. We've kind of been in this series of going through some of our research protocols from last year. Last week we did one where we talked about seeding rate and planting date, and this one feeds a little bit into that. Do you want to explain it, Alex?
Sure. So this study that we are about to show here gave us the opportunity to explore a situation that happened last spring around May, where we did have wet soil conditions during this planting date study. So basically the objective here, since we had, that was prior to Memorial Day weekend, we had a lot of rain that week and we were pushing to get studies in the ground. I'm sure farmers have that situation quite often in the spring here. So due to these high rainfall events, we had to put this protocol in the ground, and pretty much gave us, like I said, the opportunity to see how the seeding rates, different seeding rates, would impact or be impacted by those wet conditions that we found at that moment.
Yeah, so we ended up, as Alex mentioned, planting this one on May 28th. Like I said, it was wet soil conditions. I was kind of pushing to get things done, and it was a planting date on the calendar that we thought we had to hit. So everything else, pretty much the same. We did seeding rates from 40,000 to 240,000. We had 3 soybean varieties going from like a 2.5 to a 2.9 to look at. And we planted those kind of into a bad situation. So here's a look at the weather data. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
So yeah, absolutely. So I hope they can see very well, but we planted right in May 28th. That's our planting date. And as you can see on that week, we had roughly 1 inch of rain during the course of that week. We planted, and then a couple of days later we had another ½ an inch on top of that soil. And also at the same time, right after we planted, the temperature kind of went up to the 80s and 90s. So we definitely enter in the summer mode. And like Mark said, that situation, the combination of the rainfall with the high temperatures, gave us this scenario where we saw a lot of soil crusting in that field. And you can see in the right some soybeans struggling to come up from that soil that was initially wet, and then it dried out too fast with those high temperatures. Yeah,
and that really cost us a lot of stand. We didn't apply any rescue irrigation applications or anything like that. It was just kind of, we've got these densities out there, we've planted them in a bad situation. At this point, let's see how it turns out.
Right. So as we dive into the results from this trial, we can clearly see all the planting or the seeding rates in the y-axis or in the x-axis here in the bottom of the graph. We do have the soybean grain yield that we are displaying here, and interesting to find as we increased the seeding rate, we increased our yield or our standability, and we have a few pictures to show later, but basically 200,000 and 240,000 were our best yield results when you compare to all the other seeding rates that we tested in this study.
Yeah, and basically, all the other ones just lost too much stand. Last week I really like to see things in that 160,000 seeds per acre range. We think that gives us the best chance. In an extreme situation, you might still be looking at a replant scenario. They're planting at 160,000. And if you remember last week's yields, these are all quite a bit lower because of coming through those tough conditions.
Perfect. And here we displayed a few pictures so the audience can see what the field looked like close to harvest. Those pictures are from late September. So you can clearly see from top to bottom, from 40,000 seeds per acre up until 200,000 seeds per acre, the difference in stands, like Mark said, and consequently later on yields.
Yeah, basically at that 40,000 seeding rate, there were some plots that had, maybe 5-10 plants in them in that 30-foot interval, where as you went to, 200,000, I'm going to have 240,000 on here, but you got basically more to a normal looking stand of soybeans. It just really popped out. It seems like one of those things that happens is in those high density situations, soybeans will do a pretty good job of pushing through a crust, but the more of them you have, kind of the more muscle you've got pushing up against that crust in this scenario. And kind of our key learnings really were, our high seeding rates work better. That seemed to be kind of what this really showed, I think, in pretty dramatic fashion. I mean, typically we don't see that large. Last week, we looked at all those different planting dates, didn't see that large of a skip, from our low planting rate to our high. But in this case, it was a pretty special scenario, just kind of showing if you're going to plant soybeans into a tough condition, certainly think about those higher seeding rates. The first rule of thumb would be don't plant soybeans into this condition, though.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, so like Mark said, just to reinforce, this is a special situation, right, where we had a lot of moisture. We had to plant that protocol, and I'm sure, like I said, farmers would they would face this situation eventually, but like Mark said, it's not the ideal one to plant when soil is wet.
And these are just a few legal statements. So this was a 4-rep trial, in one location here at the Learning Center. So there is replication behind the data, but it's certainly, only in one location. So it is something to remember that performance may vary, obviously, across things. Is there anything else you want to add? Just kind of the...
I think this trial we will replicate, and I don't know if we will have similar conditions this year. Maybe yes. So we could see again if this is gonna be repeated. But again, a very special situation where planting into wet soils, increasing that population would drive to higher yields.
Yeah, just really interesting to show those special situations. Those are things we get to pick out of our research, and I think it's nice to bring them up, even though it didn't turn out like we expected to start the year out. But with that, we'll leave you for this week, and we'll bring you more information from the Learning Center here in a week.
Thanks for watching this video from the Gothenburg Water Utilization Learning Center. For more information, please call 308-537-4500.